morning and welcome to Rising. We have a perfectly adequate show for you today. Briahna, nice to see you back.
It's nice to be back. Took a little bit of a break to record with Russell Brand. He's not very flexible with his scheduling, I think, because he's across the pond. But that was fun, and I'm hoping that we can get him on Rising soon and a little bit of a tit for tat.
Wonderful. Is that episode out yet?
I believe it is on Rumble.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now we look forward to checking that out.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, what are we talking about today?
Well, Robby, new in political news, Donald Trump says he would testify in his own defense at a potential trial. He didn't specify which of the 4 indictments he was referring to. The former president, of course, faces criminal charges in New York, Florida, Georgia, and Washington, D.C.
If you have to go to trial, will you testify in your own defense?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You'll take the stand.
That I look forward to, because that's just like Russia. That's all the fake information from Russia. Remember when the dossier came out and everyone said, oh, that's so terrible. And then it turned out to be it was a political report put out by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. They paid millions for it. They gave it to Christopher Steele. They paid millions and millions of dollars for it, and it was all fake.
No, I think that obstruction charge is going to get the trial, Mr. President. I think that
I'll testify.
Okay, if you do, and they ask you on the stand, did you order anyone to move boxes? How will you answer?
I'm not answering that question for you, but I'm totally covered under the law.
Okay.
If you read the Presidential Records Act, just read it. You take a look at it.
Meanwhile, a Colorado-based watchdog group is suing to try to block Trump from the state's ballot in 2024. The group contends he's actually disqualified per the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, which states that anyone who has engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof is actually disqualified from holding office. We've talked about that before. So it's almost good that there's a lawsuit now, because I very much doubt the Supreme Court is going to buy this argument and say Trump can't appear on the ballot. But if for some reason they are going to do that, we need that figured out now so that he's not the candidate, rather than at the last minute when it's too late to print someone else's name on the ballot. I'm sure there are actually a lot of conservative Republican talking heads out there who will say, this is an attack on democracy. How dare they try to not let Trump's name appear on the ballot, but are secretly hoping they succeed so that they get a candidate that they think would fare better against Joe Biden. I was looking at recent polling. We're actually going to talk more about it in a minute. But Trump, even with Biden, 1 point over Biden, Nikki Haley up 7 points over Biden. Up 1 point is close. Up 7 points, that would be, if that held, that would be a huge, massive victory for the Republican Party. So
yeah, we'll get to that in that segment. It's an interesting question whether or not electability is driving voters to Trump the way that electability is the factor that moves so many Democrats to the polls. But it is back to the question of whether or not he's disqualified under the 14th Amendment. It actually has been these 2 prominent conservative law professors who've been making this case. William Baud of University of Chicago and Michael Stokes-Polson of the University of St. Thomas. They say that they started looking into this question, not really knowing the answer. They've come to the conclusion that they think that there is a credible legal argument to bar him. The legal argument and the political argument are 2 very different things. How the public would respond to another layer of a perception that he's being kind of undemocratically prevented from
taken
running
out
for
by
office.
The process rather than the people.
Right. Now that public perception might begin to change depending on the outcome of the criminal trials. Will the public accept a judgment or legal opinion that he is disqualified under the Constitution from running again if, in fact, there have been 1, 2, 3, or 4 successful judgments against him in the court of law? And I do, particularly in the Georgia case, wonder if people increasingly accept that kind of an outcome as they realize that all of the hand-wringing about 1/6 on the day is not actually what the bulk of the concern is. It is this conspiracy weeks in advance, especially now it seems there's been reporting that some of the co-conspirators are flipping on him already. And how many former heroes going against Trump are people going to be able to ignore? People who were on the right team, eventually is that going to start to crack through?
I mean, we've seen very little evidence of that so far. I don't know that it will change the public perception of Trump within the Republican Party. It will undoubtedly complicate his legal defense to have people flipping on him. I mean, he's in for a lot of trouble there, and a lot of trouble in the boxes case, as Hugh Hewitt was pointing out there. Now, Trump cites Russiagate, and I think that's just, a powerful reminder of what a boy who cried wolf moment that was for the mainstream media and many Democratic operatives and our own national security officials to have gone so hard on that narrative and have so little to show for it over time, that there is an instinctive distrust of some of these narratives about malfeasance that Trump is involved in, even now we're staring at things that are much more substantive. I mean, there was the Russiagate stuff was really undercut by what came out later, by the claims that were made about influence on social media, by the Hunter Biden story being described as another example of Russia's reach into our electoral process, and that being totally debunked. So there are people who are just not going to believe it because they were lied to before.
What do you make of Donald Trump's choice to ignore what seems to be widely held legal advice to not testify in any of these trials? Again, he didn't specify in that clip which of the cases, perhaps all of the cases, he might be willing to testify in. Do you think that is a good move, kind of as a legal strategy, as a political strategy?
No. Well, I mean, it's definitely not a good move as a legal strategy. A political strategy, sure. He loves the spectacle anyway. That's what his whole run for president was about. So he's not going to not take the spotlight when it's offered to him. Also, he doesn't get, and historically has not gotten great legal advice. He's relied on people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, who are going to share a cell with him.
Exactly.
And also, look, like he was saying, he didn't do the debates. Obviously, he didn't do the most recent debate. We'll see if he does a future one. But I saw him say the other day in an interview that he would love to do a debate with Meghan, of Harry and Meghan, because he doesn't like how she interacted with the Queen. Like, it's a very celebrity. I mean, he comes from reality TV. That's what it is.
Sure, but the courtroom isn't Celebrity Apprentice, and the question is whether or not
he's absolutely going to treat it like
he's going to.
And that might be a good political move for him.
Politically, but is he going to hurt his legal case by taking the stand?
Yes.
There were people opining earlier last month that the one particular defense in the Georgia case would require him to take the stand, basically arguing that he sincerely believed counsel's advice, that there had actually been fraud that would have justified the slates of electors that he commissioned being authentic and real. And not an intentional fraud and misrepresentation. But he would have to testify to that belief himself. Right. And so people were wondering, is that defense not going to be available to him? Because obviously he's not going to take the stand. That would be disastrous and really ill-advised. But it looks like he, at very least, is considering it if he's willing to say to a reporter, in an interview, I'm completely open to taking the stand. Yeah,
and that might be fine. A jury might find that to be a credible argument. That might be his best move. What he's still going to have problems with, even if it's believed that he sincerely did think, I don't think that's a crazy defense at all, but because he's part of this, he's being charged with some conspiracy with all these other people who did even more questionable things, who will not be as able to persuasively argue that they actually thought the election was stolen and are accused of forging documents and things of that nature.
Right.
Because they're prosecuting him as the central figure in sort of like a mob kind of way, as the central figure in this conspiracy that has more obvious criminal dimensions, that even if it's totally believed that he actually thought that, the things that the associates did, who are flipping on him, are going to say he ordered them to do it, whether it's true or not.
Right, and also
it's all going to be very bad for him.
He got different. You said a few minutes ago he got bad legal advice. Well, he didn't just get bad legal advice. He got a lot of good legal advice that he chose to ignore and cherry-picked. He threatened to fire the whole Department of Justice because they were giving him his Department of Justice, Republican-appointed Departments of Justice figures, because they were giving him the advice that we investigated all your fraud claims, we tried to see if there was any malfeasance in the selection, we found none, you lost. He kept cherry-picking attorneys and firing people or threatening to fire people until he got the answer that he wanted. So it wasn't exactly that he didn't get good counsel, it's that he thought he could cherry-pick the answers that he wanted, and is that going to stand up as he's trying to testify and defend himself in the course of one of these trials, if all the other people who were either coerced, fired, ignored, are testifying to the contrary.
Yeah, obviously the Republican Party still has time to avoid this headache and could read the poll numbers and back someone for electability arguments. But I mean, maybe they think Joe Biden is such a weak candidate that they can win with anyone, and they'd rather win with Trump.
Well, the poll suggests that they can win with pretty much anyone. It's just how close that margin of victory is going to be.
We'll see. More Rising right after this.